Folks, welcome back to the Bobby Bo Show. Here's the move. It starts with e3. Don't do this. But after e5, d4, e captures d4, e captures d4, I play d5. And it's the French defense exchange variation. Not something I'm very familiar with, but I am familiar with the middle game. And in a recent poll, most of you said you struggle with the middle game. So I've got a great game for you here. Make sure you stay focused. But first, on the last episode of the Bobby Bo Show, you unlocked some new lore. I told you where I went to college and what I studied and why I dropped out. And the next lore will be unlocked if this video gets 4,000 likes. So smash the like button. But today, I'm going to tell you what sports I used to play. And the short answer is mostly soccer. I played soccer indoor, outdoor, from pretty much most days of the week, either for the school team or for a club team, playing around Michigan and in Ohio and Indiana, mostly. But I also did play a little bit of baseball and basketball, but I wasn't very good at those. I was so small that people called me Big Bob, and I have bad eyes, so I could never hit the baseball. And then one day I was playing second base, and the batter hit a ground ball directly at me. And when I bent down to scoop it up, I guess there was a bump in the dirt because it bounced up and hit me right in the mouth and knocked my front tooth out. And I just kind of stood there shocked for about 3 seconds, and then realized I had to get the guy out. So I threw it to first base and got him out, but then went immediately to the hospital. And now my front tooth is a piece of gold with a white cap over it. And after that, I mostly stuck to playing soccer. But when I wasn't playing soccer, I was playing video games. And maybe next time I'll tell you more about what video games I played. So smash the like button 4,000 times, and I'll tell you what video games I played. And also, I want you guys to leave a comment letting me know what sports you play or used to play, and if you want to go pro. But now it's time for the Bobby Bo Show, and we got a great game here for you, folks. Knight to f3, bishop g4, and bishop to e2. And I'm kind of trying to play this like a Caro-Kann. And usually in the Caro-Kann, you just play c5, and then you bring the knight to c6, and then usually there's a pawn right here, so you can't play knight to f6. So you have to play e6, but there's no pawns on the e file here. That kind of changes things here. But I try to think if c4 is a problem, and I don't see anything wrong with it, so I play c4. But now I could be in trouble if they play knight to e5, and we'll look at that. But they're going to castle here. But if they play knight to e5, attacking my bishop, I have to decide, do I want to trade it off, or do I want to move it back? And if I trade it off, they're going to take with their queen, and now their queen is in front of my king. The knight is about to move, checking my king. I'm in trouble. This could be a bad move. I have to play bishop to e7 to block, and now they can just take my c5 pawn. And it says +1 right now, but it could go a lot worse because they're going to finish development a lot faster than you, and your king's not going to be as safe as their king. So if you try to go back, now they have bishop to b5 check, with the knight also covering these squares. You play knight to d7, they castle, and now you try to finish development, knight to f6, and they just take this pawn, and after you take back with your bishop, they play bishop to g5, pinning the knight to the queen here. And watch what happens. Now you castle, but they have knight captures d7. You can't take with this knight because it's pinned, so you take with the bishop. They take your knight now. You have to take back with the pawn now because you have to defend this bishop, and now they just trade bishops, and your position is terrible. Equal material, but your pawns are doubled up. This pawn's by itself. These two pawns are your best pawns, but they have 3 pawns over here. And their king is safe. Your king is not safe. Not very hard for them to finish development now. Terrible pawns. Weak king. They just have to play knight to e5, and they have a solid position here. But instead, they castle first, and they're still doing just fine. But knight to c6, finishing development. E captures c5, taking with my bishop now. And taking the pawn here really helps me out, because they lose a center pawn, and I get to develop my bishop, getting closer to castling. So they should just probably not take the pawn here. But now bishop to b5, pinning the knight to the king. And you can go knight to f6 or knight to e7 here, but I go knight to e7 to support the knight. Block any checks here. And they continue development with knight to c3. Attacking the center pawn now. And I should really be castling right now. There's really nothing too hard to think about until you develop all your pieces and castle. Unless they do something really crazy, but they're also just developing. But instead I go queen to d6. And this does develop my queen, so not a terrible move here. And I just felt like if I had my queen on d6, with my bishop lined up on the king, and my queen lined up right here, and my bishop right here, I just felt like this was a strong position where tactics might emerge in the middle game. So I decided to do this before castling, and after rook to e1, pinning the knight to the king, I just castle. And now this breaks the pin on this knight, and this knight. So both the knights can move now. And also I am thinking about how this bishop is lined up on the king, and also with the rook here. So if I had some sort of tactic where this pawn was defended, I could take with the bishop, check the king, take the rook. I'm also thinking about that all the time. And that's really what I learned from puzzles, is how to set that kind of stuff up just by putting your pieces into the kind of positions you see in puzzles where they're lined up with the king and other pieces and stuff. But that's something you learn over time. And another thing you learn over time is to think after every move about what changed and what pieces can now move to what squares. Like for example, I just said that the knights are now unpinned, so you should have been thinking about how my knight can go here, 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 back, back, wherever. My knights can now move. So you should be visualizing what squares my knights can move to. And after queen to d3, just like before, you should recognize that now this knight is not pinned anymore. Now this knight can move. Maybe knight to g5, threatening checkmate, so you have to watch out for this. But they forgot to watch out for where my knight can go. And I have a crushing move here. So think about it, it's a bit of a puzzle, and maybe pause and choose your moves carefully, and make sure you know what their best response is, because you have to get the next few moves right, and neither of us got it right. But the best move here is knight to b4. Now the queen's under attack, and I'm also threatening to fork on c2, hitting both the rooks, winning a pawn and an exchange. So they have to move the queen because the queen's under attack. So where can the queen go? Queen has to defend this square still. So queen to d2. But now what? Well, before, the queen was defending this knight. Now the knight's only defended by the pawn. Now I take the knight with the bishop, they take back with the pawn, and the king is wide open. So now what do? Well, there's actually so many winning moves. But the one I'm thinking about is queen to g6 check, hitting the king and the c2 pawn with the knight and the queen. So you're about to hit this fork here, right? And the king has to move. And after king to h1, now what do? You can take with the queen or the knight. And if you played knight captures c2, you got it wrong, and it's now a draw. Because now you're forking the rooks, and you probably thought, okay, they're going to move one of the rooks, and it's not going to be this rook. So they're going to move this rook to attack your queen and try to solve their problems. But no, bishop to d3, attacking your queen and the knight, defended by the queen here. So you have to move your queen. And let's look at it, bishop to d3. And you have to attack this pawn now. So queen to h5, and after they take your knight, you have a forced draw by check. The king cannot escape the checks here. You can just continue checking. If the king goes to e2, then you can win. So they have to just keep letting you check them. But instead they played rook to g1. The most logical move, the move that I calculated, did not think about bishop to d3 at all. So you have to move your queen to safety, but you also want to defend this knight, and you also want to try to checkmate the king. So queen to f5, and now bishop to d3 is too late, because of course queen captures f3 check, and they have to block with the rook. But now knight captures a1, and you took the rook. And we're just a few moves away from the end of the game. Knight to a4, hitting the bishop now. So where do you want to move this bishop? And there's a lot of ways to win, but the best is bishop captures f2, and the queen can't take the bishop. Why not? And of course the rook is pinned to the king, so the rook can't move. But look, after the queen takes, queen to d1 check, hitting the king, the bishop, the knight. You're hitting all of their pieces. And I don't think they realize that I'm hitting the knight too, because they play bishop captures h7, trying to get a pawn for the bishop here. Because after I take back with the king, they take my bishop with their queen. I played queen to d1 check. And now when they block with the rook, they're defending the bishop, but I just take the knight. Now up plus 10 material. What a great mid game. Now b3, attacking my queen, but queen to e4 check. They block with the rook, and let's just bring the knight up. And we're also just going to bring the rook over to c8, bring the rook up, win the game. They just resign now. So do your puzzles and try to set up those tactics in the middle game by playing a good opening and knowing where to put your pieces, and paying attention to what changes every time something moves. Hope you learned something on today's episode of the Bobby Bo Show. Make sure to smash the like button 4,000 times for the next lore. Thanks for watching. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Goodbye.